Logged into a meeting in Roswell, New Mexico.
Yeah, I am as well. I guess it's not started yet.
Test, yep.
Okay, I think we've got about everybody in. So good evening, everybody. I'm Joe Nebb. I'm Roswell City Manager. I wanted to welcome you here tonight for this event. I believe it's going to take us about 2.5 hours to walk through all the conversations, so kind of watch your clock, and we'll try to do the best we can with that. But I'm inviting Mayor Jennings up for some brief words at the start of this. Because I think it's important that you hear from our chief executive. So, Mayor?
Well, really, I think I'd rather have a council meeting. We'd be over about 1:30, and we'll see who really had staying power and who didn't. But, welcome. Tonight's meeting, we've got a whole new bunch, a councilman here. We have a lot of problems. We have a lot of old problems, but we need to come up with new solutions to maybe some of these old problems, and that's the goal tonight. When we looked about some of this stuff, we started looking about some of the things I know. I remember Dr. Gutierrez, and I remember what happened to him, and I know that the city of Roswell, it's impossible for them to hire a vet, even if you paid them a couple hundred, $300,000 a year, and that's just because of what's happened in the past. And I'm here to tell you that all the things that happened in the past are over. And tonight I've asked Mr. Mike Halber, he's now a retired vet. I know him of his capabilities. I've known him very well since he moved to Roswell in 1980. And he was a vet that we had at the ranch, and he certainly, over the years, we have talked for a number of times about the problems that we see going along with animals and how they're cared for, and a number of different solutions. I know him to be a fair man. I know him to be a responsible man. I know him to be a sound man financially. And so I'm just saying that because what we have is we have a problem. It doesn't have an unlimited amount of money to solve the problem. The problem is quite large when you look at the number of animals. Just in South Springs this year, there's 2 little girls that live out there in South Springs, and they had 3 show calves, and the face was eaten off of each one of them out there one time, and didn't know it was that big a problem. And the next one came back and got a 460-pound calf and about a 290-pound calf. And so I'm going to tell you, there's a lot of problems with animals here, but we're here for solutions tonight. Like I said, I've asked Dr. Albert, and I've asked that when talking with him, we have Miss Abby Hess from the Roswell Humane Society. And if I didn't ask her, Joan Young, who passed away this year, was a secretary in our office forever, and I've always been amazed at Joan Young's dedication to the Roswell Humane Society. So when you're looking at this, if you have something that you're going to get too excited in or out of control on, please go outside the door. And if not, please, I hope that we could all sit here and come together and come up with a nice, somewhat reasonable, workable solution. When Councilman Hildebrand and I and Mr. Matthews went through the city shelter facility, there was a lady in there that was sitting, when we walked in, there was a lady in there that was sitting in a little room on the floor, and there was a dog in the corner. And when we walked into that room, that dog was still sitting there in the corner. He was sitting in the corner, shivering and scared to death. And when we left that facility about an hour and a half later, the lady had just gotten up off the floor and gone to her car and got a leash. That dog never left that corner, which to me was nothing more than just plain a plain abused animal. And we don't have time for that in our community, and we don't have time for abused animals or children, and even animals that are shot. We don't need to have those kind of things happening in our community or children. So I hope that you will join with us in looking to making Roswell a better place for everyone, our children, our animals, us. You know, we can try to do it and do it better. The one thing I have to tell you, I know the zoo will come up probably with some people. I'm going to tell you the one thing that I cannot get over is driving by that pond at the zoo and not having children fishing in there. I don't know why. I remember how long it's been there. For so many kids, that's the only avenue that they have, and for recreation sometime and to go fish. So that's one. So when you keep this and look at all this, our city has a number of financial issues that you will become aware of, I think, as we go on down the road. So we have some tough times ahead of us, but we need to have it done. Anybody who hasn't paid their water bill because of COVID, you have to know now that you have to pay that. You need to go to City Hall and make arrangements for paying it, because the water, there's no more exemption for telling somebody that you don't have to pay. You're going to have to pay that, because that is an enterprise fund. That is a business just like anything else delivering water. So I'm just telling you, just be tuned. If you know anybody that didn't pay, they need to pay that one up, because there's a huge number of people that haven't paid. But anyway, thank you all so much for being here. And let's see if we can just keep it as positive as we can. I think we can all come out of here a winner if we keep it positive and keep moving Roswell forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor. We have city councilors in the room as well too. We have Councilor Perry, Councilor Halverson, Councilor Hildebrand, Councilor Arnold, Councilor Sanchez, Councilor Oropesa, Councilor Best. I believe I've caught all of them that were able to make it to tonight. So they're here, and again, we kept them off the dais because we want them out there with you so that you can talk to them one-on-one, two-on-one, however that goes. Tonight, the reason that we're here is that we have the Support Roswell Animals group that has expressed an interest to talk with the City Council, to talk with the city about some of the concerns that they see happening with animal services. So thank you for asking us to put this together as well too. For tonight, what we will do is we're going to let the Support Roswell Animals group come up. I believe they have about 3 speakers that will share their insight and their background on their concerns. I will take the second portion and cover some of the city activities, some of what the city is doing, and what we're going to be able to do with what I understood out of those concerns. And then we're going to ask Dr. Alpers to come up, and if Abby Hess from the Humane Society is here, then we'll invite her up after that. We'll take questions from the floor at that point in time as well too. We will not be able to take questions or information off of the go-to meeting, but if you do have questions and you are watching at home, please go ahead and type them into the box. We will try to respond to them after the fact as well too. But so don't let your voices not be heard just because you were not able to make it to the meeting. But that's what I'm hoping that this meeting will go through. Again, I think with what Mayor Jennings says, We know we have problems. We know that we're trying to work on them. We are looking for the solutions, and I'll tell you, there's a lot of brain power in this room, and we should be able to find those solutions. So with that, support animals, Roswell animals, I'll let you take over. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Nicole East, and I am a board member of Support Roswell Animals. We are a relatively new group, non-funded team of volunteers with the goal of improving our Roswell animal shelter operations. We represent the public and consider citizen concerns. Thank you, City of Roswell, for hosting this meeting. We appreciate the city responding to our recent letters in which we have been documenting cases of animal neglect and various issues with the current shelter operations. Thank you for allowing this time in person to further discuss our concerns and start a dialogue on how to make things better. Our group, Local Rescue, and others have voiced our concerns. We all agree there are issues and there is room for improvement. Let's work together to create better outcomes. Tonight, our group will speak briefly about the following topics, with focus on presenting solutions: restructuring, staff training, documentation, suffering of animals, cats, intake procedures, feeding, and euthanasia. We feel each of these topics deserves more discussion time and follow-up after this meeting. There is a lot to think about, and we cannot cover everything tonight. We ask the city officials, can we update the current shelter policy? It is lacking in many areas, and it is failing to provide the proper guidance to shelter staff to meet the vet board requirements. May citizens have a voice in this process. We have some good ideas, and many of our voices are based on valuable experience. Can a committee be formed for this very purpose? We feel the changes we are asking for will require more deliberation and series of meetings. At a minimum, we want an updated shelter policy that aligns with the 2020 city ordinance updates and vet board standards, including the recent 2021 Board of Veterinary Medicine sheltering minimum standards. We have evidence that our city is out of compliance with the vet board. We don't want to see our shelter shut down due to non-compliance. We want to work together to resolve these deficiencies. We can do this by revising our policy, changing procedures, offering more resources to the shelter program and staff, and getting staff on board to following new standards. But we don't want to stop there. Our city can do better than just meeting the basic legal standards. We Roswell citizens take pride in our town, in our community, and we care about our animals. We want to make an effort to do things right, and we won't settle for less. The Roswell Animal Shelter has had a bad reputation for many years. I've heard New Mexico rescue groups call our shelter Ros Hell, and they don't want to work with us. We don't want to be called Ros Hell. We have a vision for overhauling this hopeless, broken system and replacing it with a thriving organization. We want Roswell to rebuild the shelter operation to a whole new level of animal care and public service by putting effort into better practices and improving the policy in ways that compared to the nearby Artesia and other successful shelters. In this vision, we see lost pets being housed safely, cared for in a humane manner, receiving veterinarian care as necessary, rather than rotting in a kennel sick and injured. Also being granted more of a chance to reunite with their family or being adopted by a new family or rescued. Let's remember, these sweet souls did not ask to be abandoned or homeless. Even aggressive dogs' behaviors are often more the result of how humans failed them, either by neglect or abuse. These animals are completely dependent upon us to decide their fate. Should we not be decent and care for the innocent? Should our shelter not be a real shelter in a true sense of the word, to protect and house those transient animals, most of whom are adoptable and can be rehomed? In Roswell, we are quite blessed to have great rescue volunteers who sacrifice so much time and money to save these animals. Our group is not a rescue group, but we respect and support the rescue's mission and don't want a dysfunctional shelter operation to obstruct this important work. Let's provide rescue with accurate records, euthanasia lists, and the basic information they need to pull the animals, foster, and transport them to a better life. We have to start somewhere. We are thinking positive. Let's consider new possibilities. We are imagining great things will come from this venture. And now we will share ideas on the specific topics I have mentioned. I introduce Megan Tellez to share some ideas on restructuring animal control.
Nicole mentioned, I'm Megan. I will be speaking on restructuring the shelter. We have seen and researched how other shelters in New Mexico function, such as Artesia, Ruidoso, and Las Cruces. These are all good, some great examples on how shelters and animal control entities function together. All these cities have separated their shelter facilities from their animal control functions. What we mean by this is that the shelter is run by a 501c3 or a Humane Society. Their animal control officers are part of the police department and function out of that office, separate from the shelter. In this model, the shelter has the opportunity to receive grants and donations more easily so they can increase funding to support a better program overall. They also have a greater ability to be open to the public for events and volunteering. They typically have a lower kill rate. There is no such thing as a no-kill shelter. However, we would like Roswell to reach a point where the only animals euthanized are those severely ill or injured or an aggressive animal that causes a public safety risk. These other shelters are doing this, why can't we? Yes, this type of restructure would require a bit of work, but why are we not considering this as efforts for a long-term solution? Another change to consider would be to separate the intake and reclaim area from the adoption area within the shelter. Other New Mexico shelters typically do this by distinguishing between these two areas within the shelter. Spreading disease would be reduced, as those animals deemed healthy for adoption are not being exposed to those animals coming right into the facility. It also allows for a better atmosphere for the public, where customers who visit the shelter can be assisted according to their reasons for coming into the shelter. For example, someone who's attempting to come into compliance to reclaim their pet would be helped by different staff compared to a person who's coming in looking to add a furry friend to their family. Another point is that we want to see our shelter increase the staff and training in the shelter so we may provide the recommended amount of care for our animals. Title 16, Chapter 24, Part 7, Minimum Standards, Animal Shelter Section 18A states, the delivery of sheltering services shall be provided in a competent and humane manner. And Section 18B states, sheltering services shall be performed in a manner ensuring the health and well-being of animals while in the care of sheltering providers. The recommended standard of care is a minimum of 15 minutes per animal per day. Think about this. We currently have approximately 154 kennels, and if you consider 15 minutes of care a day for 154 kenneled animals, assuming there's only one animal per kennel and no more. Within a given 8-hour workday at the shelter, this requires 4.8 or 5 rounded up staff members who must be taking care of the animals their entire shift. Currently, we have 2 kennel workers working 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, meaning 2 days a week per kennel staff. They are by themselves without help. We currently do not have the number of staff working in the kennels to meet these needs and want our city to better staff the shelter. In addition to the number of kennel staff, we want the shelter to be better trained on how to handle and humanely care for the shelter animals. We also suggest that our animal control officers be separated from the shelter organization. Animal control officers need to be treated as law enforcement officers. That's what they are. They can write citations, try cases in court, from time to time obtain seizure orders. It just makes sense that they be part of the police department and unattached under the shelter. It just makes sense that I have previously worked as an animal control officer for 6 years between Las Cruces and Roswell. We're the law enforcement side, thus not always the people citizens want to see when they're adopting or reclaiming an animal. There are many ways to still allow for enforcement for reclaimed animals without having officers inside the shelter. In addition, there are issues with the shelter building itself that need correcting. The current conditions are not even meeting our current shelter policy, let alone vet board requirements. The enclosure should be maintained in good repair and protect animals from injuring themselves and ensure containment of animals. Must also ensure adequate drainage and prevent from pooling of fluids within the primary enclosures. The floors in the dog run are supposed to slope to drain liquids out of the runs and prevent pooling or puddles in the runs or walkways. The policy also goes into detail about locks that will be used for each kennel to ensure the animals are secured. Animals are sustaining injuries because some kennels are in a state of disrepair. They're getting cuts or scrapes, they'll bite the door and cause themselves further injury. Facility maintenance will sometimes come in and make some quick repairs, but they are not effective long-term fixes. Also, the grates at the back end of all kennels are rusted and deteriorating. I've seen many small dogs slip into kennels where they are at risk of being injured by a bigger dog. This is something that has been previously brought up under more than one director, but has never been corrected. The floors are not free from pooling, but I'm unsure if the slope is not present or just not great enough. But there are several areas in the dog runs in which citizens can walk through where there are pools of urine and cleaning fluids. Lastly, the kennels are required to be locked. I think this is something the city should do some research on. With the lack of staff, it's unrealistic to lock every kennel. It adds so much time to cleaning each kennel, and when a staff member has to go get a dog for the public viewing, let's look at how other shelters manage these issues of securing animals so that the public doesn't take it upon themselves to remove them, or so when we get a smart animal who can figure it out, they are unable to get out. In summary, we are recommending the following. Separate the shelter and animal control. Animal control officers need to be placed back under the police department and run from that facility. The shelter needs to run separately by entity that has a high interest in live outcomes. Reconfigure the shelter space, separate out adoptions from reclaims, add more space to house animals as needed, hire more staff so we can humanely care for the shelter animals, or according to the recommendation of the vet board. Remodel the shelter building. The cement floor needs to be redesigned to ensure that liquids are being flushed out and animals are staying dry. The grate and drainage system are in need of massive repairs. These issues are against vet board standards. I'm now going to speak about staff training. We want all shelter employees to have initial training in NACA, National Animal Control Association, or NACHO, National Animal Control and Humane Officer Academy, and continued training such as annual recertification. We also want a training manual for all shelter, animal control, and shelter employees. The current shelter policy touches on training. It states all employees will be trained in all aspects of their responsibilities. This is not happening. We know this because we requested records through the Inspection of Public Records Act about staff training, and based on the documents we were provided, all staff have not completed training. For example, we received proof of NACA training certificates for 3 officers, but not all staff have completed the NACA training. This training is geared towards officers, but is open and valuable training tool for all animal control professionals. We ask that our shelter staff be provided the NACA training as soon as possible, and that we consider upgrading to the NACHO course, which is a more current version. We know that if staff are better trained, the knowledge gaps would fade. They will have the tools they need to better provide for our shelter animals. We do see that the current kennel manager, kennel workers, and officers have been trained to vaccinate animals. We'll address personal property law violations in a future letter. We still need to perform our due diligence and confirm facts before claiming that something was improperly done, but we feel that there are cases in which officers may be taking animals illegally. This topic is covered in the NACA training in which all staff should be trained. Shelter staff seems to lack a basic knowledge of animals. They need training so they are able to accurately identify breed, sex, and recognize whether or not an animal is neutered, if it is microchipped, if it is female, if it is pregnant, etc. The public is seeing consistent errors recorded for these types of information. When the breed and sex of animals are mislabeled, that makes it hard for owners to reclaim their pets, hard for rescues to place animals. We've seen pet owners who are being asked to provide proof of a neuter for an animal that is neutered when staff could have easily determined this by looking at the animal. Animals are being left to suffer and deteriorate in the shelter because staff does not know what to look for to evaluate an animal's health. The list and examples go on of poor identification, which contributes to poorer care of animals, increases suffering, and lower chances of being reclaimed, adopted, rescued. We understand that this is a hard job, no one more than me, and it's even harder when your employers are not given the proper tools and educations to do the job. We want our shelter to produce a staff training manual or manuals for employees. Having this kind of manual ensures the city is teaching the employees the basics to do their job. Las Cruces Animal Control has an outline training manual that each employee must sign off on as they learn and feel comfortable with a task. Why can't we? While I was working at the Roswell Animal Shelter, we talked about creating a similar type of training manual, and overall everyone thought it was a good idea, but the task was not accomplished due to more or less lack of commitment to put the time and effort in. And now I will turn the floor over to Anna Edwards.
Well, good evening. As many of you probably know, I've been doing a few IPRA reports lately, or requests, and getting documentation which is necessary to make accurate statements. Proper documentation is the responsibility of all employees of animal control. Documentation is a record that can be used as a means of defense in the event that accusations are brought against the shelter or officers. Documentation also protects workers, the animals, and the facility. Intake records preserve the condition of the animal at the time of intake, including pre-existing conditions, protecting against allegations of injury or illness by the facility and its employees. If done properly, monthly reports provide a snapshot of facility functions during the course of the month and helps monitor actions that are taken by the facility that are or are not working. The policy in place does not broadly encompass the variety of records produced in the facility. It dictates what should be documented for each individual animal that comes into the facility and how long records should be held. However, it does not articulate how to record monthly numbers for calls and intakes, yearly totals, daily logs done by the officers, and the office and bite reports. We have observed many instances in which the shelter staff is not documenting as they should. For example, in our second letter to the city dated July 15th, we described a dog mauling case. However, there were deficiencies in documentation surrounding this case, including the incident report was not included on the Animal Control's monthly report. We have found multiple instances of documents that have been requested through the Inspection of Public Records Act, reporting no records responsive to the request. Upon pursuing the matter, documents have been found either from the city or citizens that have done screenshots of the information posted by Animal Control on social media, showing the documents actually exist. We have found altered documents, a violation of New Mexico NMSA 1978 30-26-1. Okay, we'll get it right. Monthly reports, let's see, where are we? Monthly reports that have not recorded multiple animal bites. A high percentage of the documents we have requested contain errors. Are these mistakes due to incompetency, or are the errors intentional to lower bite numbers and misrepresent statistical trends? We would like to see a more elaborate policy on the documentation, and we will continue to bring discrepancies to the city's attention until the issue is corrected. The following are some instances in which I have requested documentation this year and received inaccurate response. Request for medical history that shows no reference to an animal, no impound number, or any information, which is this, and there is nothing on there that refers to the animal. Monthly reports that misses 5 bites referenced in dispatch logs. I have the logs that show there were bites on a day, and then they were not showing up on the monthly reports. Handwritten impound sheets with information covered up. We do not know the method of redacting the information, but there is obviously something written and covered. Request for impound photo of impound 27972 with response of no records responsive to this request. After input requests from the community, an early photo of the dog was placed on Facebook, and a citizen did a screenshot of the photo. The photo shows the dog in poor condition prior to an alleged stroke. The photo shows vomit running down her bed, contrary to the claim made by the shelter that the dog was up and okay. We believe refeeding syndrome was possibly a factor in the dog's decline and death in the shelter. Experienced animal care providers would have been able to properly bring the dog to a viable state under the guidance of a veterinarian. An experienced vet tech could have easily identified and cared for this dog. Request for dog bite report dated 5/3/22 with a response from the city. We have no records responsive to this request. After a sternly worded letter to the city, the report was found. Request for policies and procedures. The response was the information was too large to email, and a fee of $10 had to be paid for a removable disc. I paid the fee and received the disc containing a grossly outdated 1990s policy and procedures. The shelter failed to provide the current 2018 policy that has been remedied. Requested the impound sheet for animal impound 28683. The records show no microchip. The dog was in fact microchipped, and the owner was not contacted to reclaim their animal, leaving the animal unnecessarily in the shelter while dogs were euthanized because the dog that could have been sent home was taking kennel space. What's going on here? Was the animal scanned for a microchip or not? Why are we not scanning for microchip? Why are we not caring to reunite these animals with their families? We asked to improve the record-keeping standards section in our policy. We also asked for accuracy and improved attention to detail. And as I have been requesting documentation, I have documentation on every one of these claims.
Suffering of animals. The vet board requires that shelters consider the sheltered animals' physical and behavioral health. We feel our shelter is currently neglecting both, and animals are suffering both physically and psychologically due to neglect and lack of appropriate care. Physical suffering. Title 16, Chapter 24, Part 7, Minimum Standards, Animal Shelters, Section 14A clearly states, quote, "No animal shall be allowed to suffer due to lack of veterinary care," end quote. Part 14B states, "Shelters shall not fail to provide treatment for pain," end quote. Part 14D states that animals shall be examined for injury and signs of disease at intake, and if possible, treated immediately if the animal is in pain or distress. If it cannot be provided veterinary care in a timely manner, the animal shall be humanely euthanized or immediately transferred to a facility in which they may be treated. Part 14F states that shelters may have a trained staff member, a vet technician, or vet available to check animals and provide care. Part 14H states, quote, "A system may be in place to care for injured and sick animals brought to the shelter after normal working hours. Shelters may enter into a written contract with a local veterinarian to be available on call for treatment after hours," end quote. Part 14J states, quote, "For humane reasons, it may be necessary to euthanize an animal despite the holding time requirements not having been met. An animal shall not be allowed to suffer while in the shelter's care," end quote. We feel our shelter is not meeting these vet board requirements. Our shelter policy needs several updates. First, our shelter staff needs to be trained on how to identify a suffering animal at intake, and also they need to monitor animals after intake. Our shelter needs to contract with a vet or multiple vets for after-hour services. For example, in our third letter to the City of Roswell dated August 8th, 2022, we documented how a pet dog named DJ was impounded over the 4th of July weekend. He was injured at intake. He did not receive medical attention. He was suffering from injury and died at the shelter, not even by humane euthanasia. If a vet were contracted to provide services over the holiday weekend, DJ may have received pain medications, treatments, he may still be alive, or he would have at least received humane euthanasia and not made to suffer and die alone in a cage. We also addressed the physical suffering of animals at our shelter in our first letter sent to the city on June 28, 2022. A female boxer was impounded on April 6th, was obviously sick or injured, and was left to suffer in a cage for 8 days until she was taken to a vet to be euthanized. This dog was made to suffer while in the care of Roswell Animal Services, and this is not acceptable. We also documented a case of a cat, now named Poppy, who had a broken hip when impounded at the shelter on April 11th, and whose health declined while under the shelter care because she was not provided veterinary care. After 18 days of suffering, she was pulled by rescue. The rescue provided veterinary care, and luckily Poppy is a survivor, but would have been dead given the lack of care received at the Roswell Animal Shelter. Citizens have made it clear this pattern of neglect is not acceptable. We would like the city to hire a vet tech to work at the shelter and be on call for the shelter to eliminate these cases of physical suffering, as well as being contracted with a vet. Psychological suffering or behavioral health. Per vet board requirements, we ask that our shelter consider behavioral health and develop enrichment activities for the caged animals. According to the New Mexico Vet Board, Section 1624.713, Animal Care and Handling Standards, Section B, Enrichment, states, quote, "Enrichment means improving the environment and behavioral care for confined animals. Enrichment reduces stress and improves well-being by providing physical and mental stimulation and encouraging species-typical behaviors. Enrichment shall not be considered optional," end quote. The vet board requires, quote, "behavioral health and care of each animal as well as the conditions experienced by the entire population be considered by the shelter," end quote. Our shelter is not providing any enrichment to our sheltered animals. We ask that we follow the examples of other New Mexico shelters who are providing enrichment. Here are some recent examples from nearby shelters. About a week ago, on August 7th, the Humane Society of Lincoln County, this is a Ruidoso shelter, hosted a pooch pool party in which shelter dogs, who are normally caged, were taken to the local public swimming pool and were allowed to run freely, interact with people and other dogs, and swim if they would like to. The Humane Society posted videos of the event to their social media page, and it was wonderful to see the dogs having such a great time. These types of events also help the animals to be viewed by the public and can lead to adoption and rescue. Another very recent example, last Friday on August 12th, The Lovington shelter posted video footage to their social media showing their dogs playing in a large yard space with tires, tents, some shade. It was a great enrichment activity in which the dogs were allowed some time out of the cages and into the fresh air. They were really enjoying themselves on the Friday Fun Day. This helps their well-being, and like I said, this helps the rescue tag them, and it gives them a better opportunity for adoption to see these dogs in their more natural and happy state in footage that is shared with the public.
Okay, this next section is on cats. An entire species of animals that are supposed to be under the protection of animal control are treated as second-class citizens, not entitled to the same protection of dogs. This, of course, would be cats. Cats are left in cages, often without food and water. As evidence of that, a recent video of Cat Room 18, impound A809, and Cat Room 27, impound A815, was posted to the Roswell Animal Services Facebook page. This video showed a bone-dry water dish in both cages. New Mexico Vet Board of Medicine minimum sheltering standards 16, 24, 7, 13, animal care and handling standards A6. Animals shall be provided potable water at all times. Directive number 1, amended, dated 11/9/21 from Nicole Rogers states, 30-minute rounds will need to be done after 10 a.m. Rounds include the following: need to be checked and completed, water to all animals. If this procedure is followed, there is no reason any water dish would be completely empty. I, just a caring citizen, and Janet Phillipson, not even a member of this community, purchased approximately 56 water bowls at $8 a bowl, bowls that would hang on the cages, and that there would be 2 bowls in each cat kennel. And when I go to the shelter, I am seeing them empty or not even in use, and they are not being attached to the kennels. Admittedly, the attachment needs a little zip tie to keep them in place. Photos of cats often show them in abominable condition. For example, see impound A604 showing kittens in filthy conditions. This sad photo is used as the profile picture to try and get them adopted. Are we even trying? Joe, would you like to just have that? Treatment must be provided for fleas and ticks. Cats are being pulled from Roswell Animal Services covered in fleas. This is never acceptable. Records indicate only 3 doses of flea and tick treatment were purchased between July 21 and July of 22. Again, records were requested through IPRA. Hundreds of cats were impounded and not treatment. I personally pulled a cat on 7/21/22, impound A338. He was covered in fleas and had not received flea and tick treatment, at least not in any documents that were provided. He had been in the shelter for about a month, which begins causing health issues. This is another example of suffering of an animal and not receiving veterinarian care. As far as we can tell, none or very few cats receive veterinary care. Cats receive no vaccinations, even though their counterparts, the dogs, do. Again, records were requested for vaccinations purchased from July 21 through July 22. $14,000 worth of distemper, parvo, and bordetella vaccines were purchased for this time period. Not a single vaccination was ordered for cats. A vaccination could have prevented untold suffering of animals, most notably Poppy, a cat that was allowed to deteriorate to the point of near death. The city received a grant for $14,000 for vaccinations. However, none were purchased for cats. Young kittens and nursing queens need to have a minimum of a blanket or towel to keep them off the cold kennel floor. Kittens have difficulty regulating their body temperatures, and the cold metal is disastrous. We have seen newspapers provided, but only occasionally observed a blanket or a towel. Kittens who need special feeding consideration are being neglected, and this is another failure to meet vet standards. 1624-713 Animal Care and Handling Standards states, under A, food and water, special consideration regarding types of food and frequency of feeding shall be given to puppies and kittens, older animals, and nursing dams. Kittens unable to feed themselves should not be left in transfer cages in the facility, resulting in suffering and death. See an email of 10/5/21 between Megan Tejas and Alessandra Nicole Rogers. This email documents how bottle-feeding kittens were left in transfer cages and starved and froze to death. Ms. Rogers' response was, "Can you tell me where in the policy or city ordinances it specifies care of bottle feeders?" Her response was irresponsible and not caring toward the death of these kittens. But maybe we do need to add more detail to our policy in which there is enough information for staff to know how to care for kittens. Foster programs should be implemented for kittens that are too young to feed themselves. According to 1624-713, and this again is minimum standards of the vet board, D6, animal care and handling standards, quote, the use of catch poles for routine restraint of cats, including carrying or lifting, is inhumane and poses significant risk of injury to the animal and shall not be used. Emphasis on shall not. We have seen staff use catch poles on cats. This practice needs to stop. Earlier this year, Janet Phillipson with June Senior Cat Rescue was working with me to start a program with Roswell shelter animals. She called the shelter for 3 days in a row. The phones were not answered, and she received no call back. After 3 days, I personally went to the shelter to try and check on the animal that she was looking. And while there, observed the staff at the front desk with a cell phone in their hand, and when the phone rang, the ringer was turned down and went back to playing on the cell phone. Janet decided she would no longer partner with Roswell due to the shelter being difficult to work with. This is a travesty for the cats. Okay. Next section is intake procedures. I will be speaking about the intake of animals and the importance of a proper and thorough procedure. We would like to model our intake procedures after the Artesia policy, which will require updates to our policy. The following is a description of intake steps, some of which are not listed in our current policy. Note, some adjustments should be made for aggressive or difficult animals. They're not all this easy. The intake of animals is where you learn about the animal. This is where you identify the breed, sex, color, and weight, and perhaps even whether an animal is neutered or not. Intake is where you might find that you can contact the owner. When an animal is brought into the shelter, you must check for a microchip or a collar with tags. So scanning the animal, including cats, is an absolute. The city of Roswell had updated their ordinance to require animals to be microchipped, yet why are they not scanning impounded animals for microchips? The next step is checking the animal's health. This is to ensure the animal isn't sick or injured. This procedure should be conducted in a quarantine area only. Check the ears, looking for ticks, fleas, mites, or infection. Checking the mouth to get an approximate age and to see what color the gums are. Is the nose runny or any coughing? Take the animal's temperature. 101 is normal. Anything over 103 is dangerous. Is the animal limping? Check for hair loss, any swelling in the body, legs, or feet. Check the pads of the feet for damage from hot concrete or pavement. Look for embedded toenails. The animal may then be moved to a quarantine area of the kennel for observation throughout the day. The quarantine cage must be clean, disinfected, and dry. Documenting the behavior continuously throughout the day will help determine the animal's well-being and if there is a sign of sickness, because if it can be caught early, which could save the animal. If an animal is brought in after hours and wounded or sick, it should never be left without being attended to, whether by the supervisor or a veterinarian. To leave a sick or wounded animal to die overnight is inhumane and irresponsible. Anyone doing the intake procedure must be educated and experienced and know what to look for. This is another area in which having a vet tech would be valuable. We are receiving information that the current kennel cough infection is believed to be a result of incoming animals. We strongly suggest, with the lack of success of gaining control of the infection, that you should look into the possibility of a strain other than Bordetella. Many strains take hold in communal facilities, and eradication protocols are different. Other than euthanasia, there are many creative, ethical ways to clear the infections. And I'm going to turn it back to Megan.
We need to elaborate on the feeding policy. The current policy is very vague and requires employees to make assumptions based on education they do not possess. Staff have not received sufficient training to determine feeding for specific breeds, ages, breeding cycle, etc. The current policy is not even being followed. To minimize the spread of disease, bowls should be cleaned daily and leftover food should be thrown away. This is a violation of the Vet Board Standards 16, 24, 7, 12, Sanitation Standards H. In the Artesia shelter policy, we see that they have gone as far as to list a table of weight ranges and amount of food given for those weight ranges as to take the guessing and opinion out of it. While I was at Roswell Animal Services, we had started rewriting this section of the policy. The draft is available, so it shouldn't take much to tweak it. Artesia shelter has gone as far as to state that nursing mothers and underweight animals should be fed twice a day or more as needed. They also list that incoming strays should be given water and food immediately. There are many times a stray will come into the facility and go without water until a staff member does a walkthrough, which could be a while. The city should rewrite the policy on feeding the animals. We want to see a policy in place that leaves no room for opinion, something that clearly states how much food each animal will be given, when they will be fed for those currently in the shelter and those just coming in, and goes into detail about special cases of pregnant animals, age factors, and health status.
Euthanasia. We want to add a policy section on euthanasia. Let's consider Artesia's euthanasia policy as an example. In addition to describing humane euthanasia practices, we need to explain some of the logistical process and documentation procedures. According to the Vet Board Standard 16-24-312, intracardiac injection or heart stick is not allowed unless the animal is unconscious. This means that the animal must receive pre-euthanasia drugs, such as anesthesia and sedation, prior to being killed. It also states in 16-24-7-18D, quote, shelter personnel shall adhere to New Mexico's anti-cruelty law at all times. New Mexico's anti-cruelty law NMSA 1978, Chapter 30, 1815, intracardiac injection prohibited on conscious animals, states, quote, A, it is unlawful for an employee or agent of an animal control service or facility, animal shelter, or humane society to use intracardiac injection to administer euthanasia on a conscious animal if the animal could be first rendered unconscious in a humane manner. B, a person who violates the provisions of subsection A of this section is guilty of a misdemeanor and shall be sentenced in accordance with the provisions of section 3119.1 NMSA 1978. We're not going to focus on what has happened in the past, but moving forward, we expect Roswell to follow the law and perform humane euthanasia per the Vet Board standards and state animal cruelty laws. Dogs and cats must be comatose before being euthanized by intracardiac injection. Our current shelter policy does not include a section on how euthanasia will be performed. We want a section added. We want a detailed explanation on how our shelter will follow euthanasia laws. We want our policy to explain who is deciding what animals are being euthanized, which shelter staff, and what are their credentials. We want a policy that prevents the wrong animals from being euthanized. It has occurred in the past where the wrong animal has been sent for euthanasia, including an animal that was on a required hold. We want animals to be scanned for microchip prior to euthanasia. Community Access and Service Standards 1624-717D states that animals shall be scanned for microchip prior to euthanasia. This practice is not being followed. We want records on how an animal is euthanized. We want the vet or vet tech to confirm that the animal was provided anesthesia or sedation and was unconscious before it was euthanized. Our current records do not provide this type of information. Citizens want transparency. We also want our policy to include details on field euthanasia procedures. We want the policy to state under what circumstances an animal can be shot. If an officer can capture an animal and transport it to the landfill before shooting it, this is a case in which an officer could probably transport that animal for humane euthanasia instead. Also, we have noticed that there has been an increasing number of animals being euthanized in the past few months. We do not have all of the facts at this time, but it seems like some of these animals being killed can be rescued. FORA, Friends of Roswell Animals, has made public statements that our shelter is not willing to coordinate with them to pull adoptable animals, but are instead euthanizing animals with no warning. We want our shelter to do a better job of making the effort to place animals with rescue before euthanizing. Per 1624-719 Adoption Standards K, quote, shelters in their due diligence shall make every effort to place animals with recognized rescue organizations and responsible sanctuaries, end quote. Shame on Roswell for not doing their job and unnecessarily killing innocent lives. We would also like to ask that the person who's making these decisions to euthanize animals when rescue is pleading to pull these same animals. Would you care to be in the room and watch this procedure so you can be fully aware of the consequences of your decision? Have any of the leaders, our city leaders, witnessed euthanasia of healthy, adoptable animals?
You'll be glad to know that the conclusion is one sentence. However, I did find this quote today from Ricky Gervais. It says, I believe the greatest privilege in this world is to use your freedom of speech for those who have no voice. efforts are making an impact. Our voices are loud, our message is clear. We call for an audit of operations and management services. Thank you.
Kind of difficult getting up here, isn't it? You did wonderful. Thank you. I'm going to walk through a lot of the same information that they provided is what I intended to share, but I will walk through it a little bit faster because they did such a nice job with that. There will be certain conversations or certain pieces of this where I would disagree to a certain point on this, and I'll cover those as I walk through this, but I'll give you a picture of what we're doing, where we're at, how we're going. I would say we're not that far apart. I believe that some of the options that you laid out there would be well received by the city. It's just how we would do it and the details for that. Those rescues that they talked about, Ruidoso, Artesia, they are operated by the Humane Societies, and we believe that would be a proper method. We've had those conversations in Roswell as well before because we believe the ones that understand the situation the closest are the best ones to do that. So let me walk through some of this stuff here very quickly, if I can get this thing to work. And I do have copies of the presentation slides, so a lot of the information that they provided, it's online, you can find it. Most of it is what's called New Mexico's administrative code. When they talk about the Board of Veterinary Medicine, that's the board that puts together the administrative code based upon the statutes that are approved by the legislatures. And so I wanted to start this one. This is one that I shared back in 2017 as well too. This is the mission of the Roswell Animal Services when they went through the structure of that to ensure a well-being of both animals and residents of our community by delivering professional, high-quality, responsive, and cost-effective animal control services. Roswell Animal Control Services are provided 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. I believe that as the city manager, I should go to that next slide as well too, because this is in the Roswell City Code. The city manager is authorized to establish an animal control facility on behalf of the city to be operated by animal services by and through its animal control officers, who shall have the authority to enforce the provisions of this chapter, or the city manager may, subject to the approval of the governing body, contract with a public or private person or organization for operation of the animal control facility. The city council has considered this and they put this information. I don't mean to be mean or rude within this, but all the employees of the city of Roswell are my responsibility. If this shelter is not operating correctly, it is my fault, and I will accept that responsibility. I have the utmost confidence in Nicole Rogers as our director out there and all of our employees to do the best job that they can. Can we increase training? Yes. Can we increase the process of why we do that? Yes. But I believe it's improper to leave our employees out there with that stigma that they are doing this intentionally, like pulling wings off of a fly. I don't believe that's proper or right. And so I want to make sure you know that I support my people and I will help them do better within that structure. Here's the governing documents that go through for all the animal control and animal shelter. It starts with the state law, Chapter 77, the Livestock Code, and Article 1 is dogs and domesticated animals. This is what the legislature put together for that. You can find it online. The administrative code, a lot of the information in the Title 6, Part 7, Chapter 24, all in the shelter providers is out there. I will go over some specific pieces because I want to make sure you understand from our viewpoint, because we believe that we are following this. Again, there's examples out there that we believe we can do better, but we are following that administrative code. Roswell City Code, Chapter 4, Animals. We went through a 7 and 8 month rewrite of our animal code ordinance in order to bring it up to date, because as they alluded to in their conversation, we have outdated documentation, we have outdated information that never was kept up from way back when, and I believe that we've been working since then in order to get there. In 2018-19, we created the Roswell Shelter Guidelines, Standards of Operation. It utilized the veterinaries' standards as well as what's in the administrative code in order to create that. I believe we can spell that out a little farther. One of the documents that they alluded to that went back to 1960s or something, that is our operating procedures. These are our standard operating guidelines that our officers are running off or our shelter people are running off of. Some of them are way out of date. They do not match up to exactly how we do business today, and they need to be corrected as well too. Going into it, this New Mexico code, this administrative code was talked about, so I will say it talks about the competent and humane matter of how to operate the sheltering services. In Section B, it talks about the recommended standard of care is 15 minutes per animal per day. We agree with that. It has not been followed because we have not enough people. And so the whole process that we will have with the conversation with the city council, we believe that if we were to meet 15 minutes a day for our over full facility, we need 3 additional people to do that, which is an additional $150,000, $180,000 to put into this service. Currently, our animal control services are running a little over $700,000 a year in order to take care of what we have currently. I will say that at the bottom, and this is, they alluded a little bit to this in their presentation as well too, the sheltering providers shall practice active population management. There is nobody out there at that shelter that wants to euthanize one animal. And I'll share that a little bit farther as we go through that. The challenge is that we have only so much space. Our fear is that if the animals are left in the shelter for too long, they have a chance to infect all the rest of them. And we'll, in 2015, I believe, or right around that time, we ended up having to close down the shelter, put down a lot of animals that were infected by parvo, and bring that shelter back. We ended up building or setting up a temporary over in another building in order to keep the services going, but we do not like to do that. This was talked about a little bit, the record-keeping standards. One of the things that was brought up within the documents of saying we need to do a better job of are the record-keeping standards. I wanted to share with you what should be included in the records by law, and this is what we will make sure that that information is in there. I believe that our new software system that we will show you as well too covers all of that information within there. The date of the acquisition, the description, the tag, the reason, veterinary care, disposition of the animal, date of redemption, name, address, and telephone number. I will say that when and you'll see when we show you the software, when you see glitches within our software system, it's because we serve as the Chavez County Animal Shelter. We take in animals from Lake Arthur, Hagerman, Dexter, and Chavez County, as well as the ones from Roswell. And I think that's just something that we need to look at to make sure that we recognize all of that. We did meet with all of those agencies this week and talked about our challenges within the shelter and how we can do this a little better. But when they bring in their animals, they don't have the access to the software, and so we're going to work through that because we want to make sure that the intake is there. That software updates every hour, which means that once the animal is in there, in an hour, that animal can be seen by the public, by the rescues, by anybody, so that you can know how it'll get through there. And I'll talk about the intake time as well too here in just a little bit. This is just some of the other information of the record-keeping standards as to what it should be and what it shouldn't be. Shelter should maintain records for a minimum of 2 years from the date of that animal's. I don't know if anybody understands this, but when we release an animal, we have to track it to its end course as well too. We have to know where it is going as well too, so that we know that it has made it all the way through its system by this structure. Disease control, health, and veterinary care standards, that's 16.24.7.14. This is something that they've already covered that. No animal shall be allowed to suffer due to lack of veterinary care. Shelters shall not fail to provide treatment for pain. We will follow all of that. I'm going to go to the next slide, which is Section E, because they also lay out in the administrative code what we should consider and what we should look at for the animals that may need veterinary care when we bring them into the intake. As we put that information, it's this one right here, I apologize. So as we put this information in there, this is the common signs of illness, and thank you for sharing the viewpoints on that as well too, because I think it matches up fairly closely to administrative code. These are the conditions that we want to make sure that we go and seek veterinary care for any animal. I for one agree with you that there should not ever be any animal that suffers. And it's a difficult time because we don't get to bring in the cute, cuddly purebreds or anything. We're out there picking up somebody else's discarded critter generally. Now, if it's a owner escape or something, that's a little bit different. But most of the animals we have are skin and bones. They've been hit by a car. They've been damaged in some way. Our job is to help pick that up for health and safety reasons. But we do not want those animals to suffer. And there are reasons for some of the examples shared, but I'm not going to get in that because I'm going to focus on the solutions as we have as well too. But this is how we will teach our employees in the future as when the animals come in. If they have any of these conditions to that level, we will seek a veterinary care. We will make sure that that animal is not in pain or in damage in any way, and we'll make that. We have officers that have been with us for quite a while, many years, and I would say they're the senior officers, and by code as well too, they can make some of those determinations as well too. I think one of the things that we're afraid that has happened in the past is that we have a new employee that's not on for very long, and they make a decision, but they don't run it up the chain just to verify that that is acceptable. And that's where I think we talked about Ms. Rogers, some of the policies that she's trying to put in place in order to help get our officers so they understand what they need to do. Community access service standards. This is all the information that as when we go into the shelters and everything and how we'll take in the animals. One of the biggest challenges we have is when somebody goes out there and throws them over the fence so we can pick them up in the morning. If you know anybody that does that, please tell them, stop it, don't do that. There are other methods for that. Again, we're cleaning up somebody else's unkindly care to those critters. Within that whole structure as well too is that we will follow these conditions and everything for community access. One of the things that we had to be careful of is that some of the volunteers, when they come in, they want to attach themselves to all of our animals that are in there in the intake, and the challenge is that if we start treating them as pets, we can carry the disease all the way down the line, and we want to make sure that we prevent that from happening. I like the idea of moving those out of the general population and doing that as well too. So we'll keep working on that. It talks a little bit about the microchipping and everything. And in our conversations with some of the veterinaries on the microchipping and everything, there are occasions on an animal that the microchip does not stay where it was placed. And that becomes a trouble. So our training of our employees will be to scan the entire critter. If they don't find a microchip along the spine or up at the top, we will do their belly. We will do their leg. We are going to make sure that there is no microchip there before we move forward with that. Just some more on the community access and service standards. It talks about all the shelters, the rescanning. It talks about the euthanization, having it rescanned with the vet, and I'll talk about the euthanization here in just a second. Animals in law enforcement protective custody should be kept away from the general population too, because they are not eligible for adoption yet, and so we should find a way in order to keep them all separated as well. Shelter personnel standards. This is where we go into the conversation. I've got the anti-cruelty law up there. I've got all the other information. Within this is the New Mexico Administrative Code for how the shelter personnel standards will be enacted and how they will be trained. This is the state statute on cruelty to animals. And I will say that, you know, the challenge within the law and everything is that you have to be convicted. You can be charged with it, but you have to be convicted, and that's a longer process with that. I think our goal is to make sure that it does not happen. And so I'll leave it at that with the cruelty to animals of what that's in there. Here's where in the administrative code, all shelter personnel will be trained in these 12 items. And then we've talked a little bit about this with the last conversation, so I won't go into these, but you can see all 12 of them and what is involved in that training. They talked about the National Animal Care and Control Association. This is where we are getting our training for our people. The Animal Control Officer 1 designation carries all of that information within it. And so our goal is to make sure that all of our shelter personnel, that does not include just the officers, it includes the individuals in the shelter as well too, will receive this training within a year of their employment. And then they have to recertify every 3 years. I think one of the things that we saw within the training, we had some individuals that were trained, and it was a long time before they recertified or they received their new designation. That is something that Ms. Rogers has been trying to work on and clean up. I believe that almost all of them, other than probably a couple of our more recent hires, are all trained to the ACO one. Is that correct? Yes, sir, it's correct. All right. We cannot do this without the rescues and the fosters. And there's actually guidelines within this administrative code as to how the rescues and the fosters are going to operate as well too. Because again, like I said, we need to track the chain of custody of any of our critters that are released, because we need to know where they're going and where they're not going. And so with this, I think this is all the information that is required within the foster housing. We have tried to stay away from going out and inspecting any sites that are being used as a foster, because we would like to have those animals out of our shelter and moving toward wherever they need to be. I think one of the biggest challenges we have within our standards and the standards of the rescues and the fosters is it's expensive to move animals out to wherever. They rely upon a big network of volunteers. And so when we have our overpopulation or our crowding of our shelter, it's very difficult to get enough animals out usually in order to, at the times that we need them. And we'll talk a little bit about that, and get them where they need to go. So if there's a backlog within any of that system, we used to have four rescues operating fairly active with us. We are down to 1 rescue and a lot of advocates that are trying to help. And that is something that we need to try to find. How can we get there a little bit faster for that? And I'll explain that in a little bit too. We got the adoption standards. We've tried to drop as much of our fees down as we can. The fees that are still out there are required by law, such as spay and neuter. All of those different processes are out there. We adopt for $1 because we want the animal out as well too. We believe that if there's a challenge with somebody being able to afford it, we don't want that to happen. And so the idea is we keep it cheap and we try to get the animals out as quickly as possible, because we don't want to keep them in there as well too. I appreciated the conversation on what Las Cruces has done, what Lincoln County has done with Ruidoso. What I'm asking is don't leave the animals there that long that they need the enrichment. But you guys all understand what I'm trying to say. We need to provide the enrichment. I agree with that if it needs to be done. But we want those animals out. We don't want those animals left with us. We want them in their forever homes as quickly as possible. Just the rest of the adoption standards and the shelters and everything, they've covered all that. I won't go through that any farther. We do have some requirements on checking with the rescue organizations, making sure their records are right, making sure that we know who their fosters are. We track all of that as well too, and we'll continue to do that. Let me get into the euthanization from the licensed euthanization technicians and agencies. We do not euthanize. We allow the veterinary clinic. We use 4 veterinary clinics in order to do the euthanization. They are required by their license in order to do it a certain way as well too. If they are doing it incorrectly, then please let me know, because like you said, they are our agents as well. But we will make sure that does not happen in that process. But this talks about the euthanization and how we walk through that. We have attempted to hire vet techs from when we had the trouble before. We were not able to find a veterinary or a tech that would be willing to work with the city of Roswell with where we were at. Once I think the mayor alluded to the veterinary that we lost during that whole issue before about 2015-16. So we do have relationships with all 4 of them. Don't mind having a contract for service with any of them. The challenge is that, I mean, they all have emergency hours, after hours. The July 3rd, July 4th incident, there was contact made to the veterinaries, but there was no response to that, and we ended up into that. I agree that that animal should not be left to suffer, and we should have taken care of that. But if we can't get it in for the vet care, then we have to do that as well too. All right, let me jump into the facility that we have. There was talk about building it a little bigger. There's a talk about a lot of different things. We had a conversation with one of the Best Friends adoption groups this last week as well too, and we were talking about how big should our facility be for a community our size. And their answer is that the bigger you build it, the more critters you will have within it. And so the idea, their recommendation with that was find a way to get the animals out faster so that you can get them on their way to where they need to go. So I kind of went off of that a little bit, but I will tell you that here we have 98 dog kennels. 70 of them are big dog, 11 are quarantine, 11 are puppy, and there's 6 in the emergency room. For the cat kennels, we have 28 in the cat room and 26 in the feral for a total of 54. What I'm telling you right now is that if our facility reaches 90% capacity with any of these classifications up there, then we will have to reduce that number to keep it at 90%. That actually allows us enough enclosures where when we're cleaning, we can get them safely into a different site and clean that area the proper way to make sure that there is nothing. I think one of the fora conversations, and I believe it was on Facebook as well too, is that we had 2 or 3 dogs that were taken out of there that ended up having parvo or testing for parvo. Challenge with that is that's a very infectious disease, and we need to clean properly if that's happening. And we do clean, but I think that once we know those things are happening, then we can make sure that we're not jeopardizing another critter with that. But we will be working toward that 90% capacity at any given time. When we hit 100% capacity, that's where we get into a lot of trouble with that as well too. But 90% will allow us to move animals around within that group in order to do the work that we need to make sure that they are healthy and safe and ready for adoption. Here's our criteria for euthanization, and I hope to build off of this with everything that was said earlier, because I believe that we can build a process with that. There are 3 reasons that we euthanize animals at the shelter: injury, illness, or disease. Aggressiveness, and overpopulation and space. Those are the 3 reasons why we will put an animal down at our shelter. We want to get those animals out. There are criteria for sending an animal out with an injury or an illness. We can do that as well too. We just have to make sure the documentation is correct as we send them out there. Our biggest challenge is, of course, overpopulation and space. When we are out of room, then some of the examples that were shared could happen where an animal stays where they should not be, and we need to get them into the shelter or find out what's happening. With our new software system, we do not carry a list of which animals will be euthanized. The challenge is that process changes daily on that, because the determination is time in the facility, the disposition of the animal, any disease or injury, because we only have so much space. The animals that that we may have, because there's not a list, but that we believe that will have to be removed by euthanization, will change based upon having 4 more critters come in or 6 more. That's going to be our challenge with trying to give a list of that. What we are hoping to do is that we believe that the minimum amount of time, because we have to set up the veterinarian and everything, is a 2-hour notice in order to make sure that somebody knows that we will be emptying all those a number of enclosures to keep us at our 90% level. But those are the reasons why we go through the euthanization. You will see when we show you the software, and Nicole, you might want to head over to the software, and so once I get to that slide, because I want to show that. That software will show how long we've had animals within the shelter, and that's the stuff that we are working with. So I will give you some guidance as to where we're at currently right now with that. Really quickly, I have 3 slides here, and then we'll get into that. So these are the conditions of illness, and this is the reason why it's dangerous to our shelter. And So the big reason is that a lot of the diseases are infectious, and they can take out a whole row or a whole shelter very easily. We want to make sure they're out there. The longer an animal is in the shelter, the more danger there is of contracting an illness, because they're in that closed-in shelter. So second one is aggression. And I think, I appreciate what was said earlier about the aggression. We do want to make sure that that animal is aggressive to the point where there is a problem with the adoption. I think in the condition is that if they can make it into a truck, we should be able to consider whether or not that animal needs to either put down because of its aggressiveness or can do that. We will build a system so that at least there is a double check on that, where it's not the officer hanging out there by themselves, but we'll have somebody else at least verify that that has to happen at that time. Overpopulation is the biggest thing. I've got some details up there. 7.6 million, where I took this information from, 7.6 million pets are taken in the shelters annually. Twice as many stray pets are in the shelters as those signed over by families. Only 10% are spayed or neutered when they come in. And the number of dogs brought through breeders is roughly the same as the number adopted through the shelters. So those are the challenges we have with trying to get our forever animals back out of there. I have one in my house as well. No animal shelter should take euthanization lightly. The shelter business is built on rehoming and happy endings. I just want to make sure that we leave it with that, because that is the difference between our officers are on the street to take that health and safety issue off the street. And hopefully the animal's not getting hit by a car or causing any other kind of disruption with that. The shelter's job is to make sure that they maintain that shelter, get as many animals out as possible. Let me go through the 24 Pet Connect. So if you want to tab out of this, we'll go through the software. Nicole's got a microphone over there as well too. She does an excellent job of explaining what this service does. But it is, I'll tell you, it is 24 Pet Connect. That is the software that we are now using for intake. It is accessible to all. There is also a line on here for shelters that they can have access to as well. Nicole, take it away.
Can everyone hear me? Good? Jake, thumbs up? Okay. Okay, so this is accessible to any and everyone. 24 Pet Connect. First thing you're going to do is put in your zip code. I'm going to use 88203. That's animal control zip code. So if I'm just someone that lost my dog, I may have lost my dog, could have gone missing a couple hours ago. I went to the grocery store. I come home, animal control is closed. And so instead of, first of all, if we don't answer the phones, we're closed, nobody's available, and it's not on Facebook, because we do update Facebook as well, you can go to the Lost My Pet tab. Lost My Pet tab, you guys can see it. It's going to show you every single animal in the facility, every single one of them. So if you happen to have lost your animal, let's say I have a Morkie. Let's say if I don't see the Morkie here, and you can see how long, the first dog, 879's been there, it came in today, okay? 882 came in today. So you can see for a total just today, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, Bull Terrier, 6, 7. 7 dogs came in today, okay? And that doesn't include the cats. So like I said, if you're missing your dog, so if I lost my Morkie, there's a lost pet notice. We call it a lost pet report, but the website, lost pet notice. You put in your information, your cross streets, okay, 8th and Main, 8th and Richardson, your zip code, and then let's say 20 miles from that area. And then you can put in a brief description of the animal. You can submit that, and 24 Pet Connect will shoot you an email within an hour of any animal that comes in that even remotely matches that description. So this service is great for the public, somebody that may have lost their dog or cat. I like cats too.
I would add on top of that, so one of the examples that were shared is a misidentification of a breed. this will help that as well too. If one of our officers actually misidentifies a breed, we have the pictures of the animal. It will get them as close as possible to that example, and they'll show them ones that may not be that specific breed, but look exact like the description of the animal.
Exactly. Also, with the Lost My Pet is the Adopt. So you go to the Adopt tab right here, and like I said, this is available to any and everyone from all over the world. You go to the Adopt tab, and it's going to show you all of the available animals. So every single animal that's up for adoption, that's not the 4-day reclaim hold, up for adoption will be under the Adopt tab. Okay, so let's say this poor cat, he's been in there since June 10th. He hasn't been adopted, hasn't been reclaimed, hasn't been rescued. These poor kittens, they're growing up in there. But it'll show you, as you can see, what kennel it's in, or I'm sorry, the kennel might be on, once you click on it, this cat, it'll tell you what kennel it's in, how long, approximately how long it's been there, how old it is. And then as you can see, it says the information was refreshed 8 minutes ago. The cool thing about this website, it is updated hourly. So as long as an animal comes in at that, in the next 59 minutes, it's going to be updated, and you'll see 24 Pet Connect and Chameleon calls it inventory, but you'll see our population. So it's fairly new. We just got this in June. So we're working out kinks with the website. We're trying to meet the rescue's needs. I know that Sammy back there, Fora, they want weights for animals, which is helpful for anybody, but weights for the animals, how long it's been there, their animal IDs, all that good stuff. So this is also accessible to any and everyone, but this is more rescue specific. So if you guys can see up there, there's the 3 dots. If you guys can't see it, I mean, you can call me. I'm more than happy to walk anybody through this because it's very helpful. Shelter and rescue partners. There's a little bit more steps, but it's very detailed. Zip code again, 88203. We'll do all animals within 50 miles of that zip code. You can click Roswell Animal Control, and you ask for find animals in the shelters. The first couple are lost by public. So this also allows the public, you can put your lost pet notice and ask for 24 Pet Connect to email you, but you can also put your lost dog on this and everyone can see this. So the first few animals were lost by public, you can tell over here on the right. But over here, we'll scroll down and you can see our same cat again. It's gonna go by who's been there the longest. The same cat's been here. If anybody's interested in one of the friendliest cats I've ever seen, please come to Cat Room 19. She's a doll. So hopefully maybe this will help somebody get rescued. So the cats, hard to get their weights. Let's go down to the dog. This is a lost by public dog. So dog room 20 is the next dog that's been there the longest, 32 days. As you can see, we've got American Foxhound Pit Bull Terrier. Chameleon has over 1,000 breeds, so we don't get the typical Roswell Pit Bull mix or Chihuahua mix. We have to put in a whole bunch of information, so we're working with Chameleon and Pet Connect to get the breeds more down to what we typically get here in Roswell. So you click on its details page. Okay, so it's going to tell you everything you need to know about him and how much he weighs, how long he's been there, and all that good stuff. So the cool thing also about this website is if the dog you're looking for, let me go back to 24 Pet Connect. If the dog you're looking for was there yesterday on the Adopt, was there yesterday, also these poor puppies have been here for a very long time. If they were on this website yesterday and today they are not, they are no longer in the facility. They were either reclaimed, adopted, or unfortunately euthanized. So if they're not here, they're not in the facility anymore. They're not available for adoption or any other reclaim or anything else. So with that being said, please feel free to look. We try and get the pictures updated as much as possible or as quickly as possible, so it's all readily and at your fingertips. This is for any and everyone. Like I said, it has our complete inventory, where they're housed, how long they've been there, and pretty much everything we can give you. Also where their animal was picked up. So pass them up.
Live. Maybe start on current slide. It'll get me. All right. I'm going to keep going though because I only have, it looks like 4 slides left, and then we're going to ask Dr. Alpers to come up, provide some of his wisdom with it as well too. So this 24 Pet Connect, we are hoping will be utilized heavily in order to get our critters out as quickly as possible. It's access to all updated hourly. All the detail is in there. When there is an issue with some of the detail, what happens is that when the county brings in strays from outside, they may not do all the intake paperwork, so our staff has to update that information when they get there. And so we really want to have everybody utilizing this and the rescues for that. Our goals, and this is the first one, and I've said this since 2017, our goal is to take every opportunity to release the animals to individuals, the Humane Society, or the rescues. Our goal is for all adoptable animals to find a home. I'm asking for your help as well too. The faster we can get them out of this overpopulated area, the better. The city will expand the standards of operation procedures. We're happy to work with the Support Roswell Animals group as well. A lot of great ideas there. We're going to do that. We're going to work on that. We will enforce those requirements on the operation as far as the Humane Society and the rescues. The 48-hour rule. This is the thing I want to make sure I leave everybody with. Once an animal is tagged, the animal by city code is to be removed within 48 hours. We want to get that animal out. We actually, because of our own standards, we have to almost keep that animal for 48 hours because when an adoption comes in, it has to be spayed or neutered. So they go and set up the visit with the vet. We have to take the animal over there. They get to take the animal home after the surgery for the spay and neutering. So we really want to hold to the 48-hour rule because that's where we have to get them out. The rescues actually have a little bit looser criteria as to how to get those animals out because we already have the agreement that when they get to their forever home, they will be spayed or neutered, and so we have that process. The frustrations, some of the frustrations, and in the conversation as we were coming up to this, I will say a lot of the city council share these frustrations, that people who do not understand or care about their pet responsibilities are a frustration for us all. I don't believe that any one of those individuals would be in this room because they wouldn't take the time out of the day to come in and talk with everybody and find out that is something that really frustrates us. I know that the city council will look at the penalties that are associated with certain criteria because we want to make sure that happens. We want to make sure they understand if you can't handle a pet, don't have one. And so I think that's the process where we're at. I think that the claims against staff are arbitrary, capricious, torturing, or killing animals. I think that's just a very dangerous mindset to set out there. The same could be said that not a very nice looking animal actually generates money for a rescue because people donate if there's a cause. And I think that that's the stuff we have to stay away from both sides and say that this is Roswell, we do it a little differently here, and we work together. There is not an employee out there that tries to come in, wakes up in the morning, says, I'm going to try to torture an animal. There's a lot of different things that happen, but we want to walk through that and we will correct those behaviors if anything like that. Those employees don't last long with us if they don't have the heart of what that service is. Rescues that tag an animal for adoption but do not pick it up, that's a frustration for the city. One of the fears about what I was told with when in the olden days with the euthanization list is that if they wait to tag the animal after we give out a euthanization list, that gives the animal 48 more hours. And so the animal stays for 48 more hours, but the problem is that the ones that are tagged will be safe for that 48 hours, but the ones that are not, because if it's overpopulation of the shelter, we have to make that room somehow. Strays are generally unhealthy when we receive them. I talked a little bit about that. Social media is never kind. It takes the care. And I would say that if the shelter is operating right, that animal never comes back 100% under our care. It needs to be in its forever home. These are some of the frustrations we heard from the citizens, putting adoptable animals down. That's a concern for a lot of people. maintaining the daily intake database, assuring that the strays are not unfairly allowed to suffer. All of that is valid points for, I would say, on both sides, and that's what we're going to work on, I think, with the conversation from what we heard tonight. Challenges moving forward are the disconnect between animal service operations and how rescues operate. One of the challenges we have is that, we can't bring a plane in and fly one animal out. But if there's 15 or 20 of them to go, it works very well to fly them to Colorado or wherever. That you've seen the articles in the paper for that. Our need to get animals out does not meet the rescue's needs of making that foster system work and getting those animals into their forever locations. And I don't know how to fix that yet. We've not been able to find a way to keep that mesh together as much. We need to find a balance between regulation and education. I don't believe that we can fine everybody out of our condition. I think it has to go into education. It has to go into making sure people understand. That's why we've started doing these educational pieces that are up here as well too. We're going to do more work on that education. We're going to do more work. When Megan worked for us as well too, I tell you, when we started doing the adoption events and everything else, we started to see animals leave our facility. Thank you for that, Megan. And that is the stuff that we need to do. Staffing and training shortages, that's something that affects us all. I sit on 60 open positions almost every day for out of all the departments of the city. I have 740 employees and 60 positions. It doesn't matter what magic we try to do, we always lose one when we're gaining one. Same thing happens at animal control. When we get a new employee, then the training begins as well too. Just like with the police department and everything, we don't let them work unsupervised until they understand what their responsibilities are. And so those are some of our biggest challenges with staffing and training. This is the thing I want to leave you with. This is the slide, and then we'll go into some other conversation. But we took out the 21 days in 2019 when we rewrote the ordinance and everything, because the concern was 21 days sounded arbitrary, or that we always butted up against the 21 days. Here's the numbers that are very, very important. After 4 days, that animal is available for adoption. So if you want to know which animals which animals make it onto any kind of list, if they're there for over 4 days, we have an animal, the one dog, 32 days has been in the shelter. That animal is in danger of being put down if all the conditions line up. We want to get these animals out after 4 days. Please try to find a way to help us do that, because the longer they stay in there, it is not healthy for them. I think one of the slides about aggression is that an animal caged for a longer period of time becomes more aggressive. We want to prevent all of that from happening, and I love we'll see if we can enter those events as well too, because I think that would be a good thing to find a way to get the volunteers to come out and help work with one animal and get them out for a while. And then the 48 hours to pick up once tagged for adoption. But I just want to leave you with, please, after 4 days with this 24 pet connect, you can do it 2 o'clock in the morning in your bed. Check them out. Find the ones that we can get out of there and find a way to get them done. The rescues, all you have to do is contact them. They will help. The fosters will help. Everybody will help. We want these animals out of there because we don't want to leave them there. Dr. Albers, any professional words of wisdom that you'd like to share now? That's the end of my stuff. Thank you, everybody.
Well, I don't have any pearls of wisdom, because this is a problem that existed in Roswell when I came in 1979, and the faces have changed somewhat, but the problem hasn't. It's still here. What needs to happen is responsible ownership of these pets. It needs, no matter what you say, you have to spay and neuter those animals. That's the only way to control population. So the problem is difficult. The people trying to solve the problems are all working for one common goal, and that's our animals. We want to protect them. We want to provide for them. We want them to be back with families. We have some difference of opinions, which is very normal. The issue needs, we all need to be respectful of each other. We need to respect each other and understand that that person who is trying to help is doing what they think is right. So to correct the problem, everybody has to have some give and take. There's got to be some compromise, because there would be 80 opinions right here in this room. And how do you work through all of those? You don't. You have to compromise some. Everybody wanted to be a veterinarian. The kids that come through the clinics, the kids that do all this because they love animals, and that's wonderful. But not everything you have to do is lovely. Some of it's pretty hard, and some isn't. Some of it isn't much fun. I don't know of any veterinarian who went to school so he could euthanize animals. It is one of the best services we provided to the public, because you stopped suffering. You stopped problems. If you had responsible owners, you wouldn't need an animal control, because they'd take care of their own pets. They would do something with them, instead of put them out in the street or across the fence so somebody else has to take care of them. And then when you put them in a pack mentality, then you've got a real problem to deal with. And your options for taking care of that are very limited. You know, once they're in that mode, it's very difficult. I think everybody in here wants to help resolve the problem and to work on it. So I think that's good. But I think to go into a committee or whatever the process is going to be with a closed mind and closed eyes is disaster. It's not going to work. People have to work together. You've got to give and take to make this thing work. I think it can. As you can see, there's all kind of regulations from the city of Roswell. The laws are in there. They're down. From the veterinary board, through Albuquerque, through the state legislature, all those things are in there. What isn't there is compliance. The laws are there. We just need to live by those rules and those laws, and we need to have responsible ownership. So I think maybe the 48 hours and the 4 days is a good plan, but you've got to put those animals into good homes. You take them out of one mess and put them in another. You know, the pandemic has showed us that, because people were home and they wanted pets. And then the pandemic started to resolve, and all of a sudden they didn't need those pets anymore. So they were on the street, they were in the alleys, in the trash cans, and tracking people and other animals down. So I think this is a great start. I think people who want to serve and to try to work on this are great to get going. But there's no magic to this thing. It's been around for a long, long time. And it's going to be here for a long time. It didn't start in 2 years, and it's not going to end in 2 years. It's going to be an ongoing process to deal with that. I think education, as Mr. Neeb said, is critical. You know, nobody wants to see that dog on a clothesline pole, running back and forth in a dirt yard with no water and no shade. But it happens every day. So we need to educate people, and we can start some of that by doing children. Children are great. They go home and ask, why is Betsy on a leash out there? Can we just take her for a walk? You know. So I think it's the environment that we put these animals back into is important. We can't take that. We can't lose sight of that, because they need not only a forever home, they need a good forever home where they're going to be loved and cared for and provided proper care. It's just not an easy situation, and it's going to be frustrating. But if you want to serve on a committee or you want to try to make this thing better, you better open your eyes and open your mind and be willing to listen respectfully to other people on that committee, because they're going to have different ideas. So I don't think there are any real pearls of wisdom. I think it's hard work. Let's roll up your sleeves, and if you really want to work on this, then to try to progress in that manner. So, thank you.
Thank you, thank you. We've got a little bit of time left. If there's anybody that would like to share their wisdom as well, we do have a microphone up front if you want to come up and just share a little bit there, and then we'll talk about where we're headed from here. Because I think the conversation was great, and I'm giving everybody time to line up, come up to the microphone. So, but it is if you would like to. But we will be putting together some future conversations. So, ma'am.
Is it okay if I address the people behind me instead?
You're welcome to.
Thank you.
Yeah, I
Appreciate
think
that.
you just flip it around and might be able to help you if nothing else.
Hello, my name is Tammy. I'm a transplant to Roswell, and I'm really nervous talking in front of people, so bear with me. A lot of this was hard to hear, and so I won't go back and rehash a lot of the stuff that was talked about as far as some of the issues, the problems. I did want to share with you 4 things that I came here to this meeting in mind. That I've noticed in the few years that I lived here in Roswell, and that there was a lack of education that's been touched on. And I think that there are things that we could do as a community, maybe to put together, like he talked, a volunteer committee, Roswell citizens who can work together to try to help educate the rest of the community in Roswell and the surrounding Chavez County to make a difference in our animals' lives. One of the things is to help people figure out how to not let their animals escape and run around all the time, because that happens all the time in town and in the county. Another thing I noticed was a lack of cooperation, and that is between the citizens of Roswell and the city leadership. And it's not, it's not to put the blame on one entity. It's all of us need to find a way to work together. And that again, maybe organizing and creating another group of people who can try to help to come up with some answers on how we can work together with our city leadership, with animal control, with what Roswell, I just forgot what your Support Roswell Animals is trying to accomplish. And that kind of goes into one of the other things I had on my list here, and that was transparency. And what I noticed after living here for a few years is instead of there being an openness, a sharing of information, and being transparent to our community, it seemed like there was a wall of defense in many cases around animal control and Roswell Animal Services, and that may not have been intentional, but it created this perception that they don't want to work with us. And I'm just a private citizen, but when a private citizen calls and tries to get help for an animal that's lost or an animal that's been hurt, and they're told, well, you can bring them in to animal control and leave it here, but we can't guarantee that we're going to be able to find a home for it. We can't guarantee that it's not going to get put down because it might be too injured. But if you keep this animal for 7 days, it's yours and it's yours responsibility. And that makes it difficult for the private citizen to be able to help with the enormous problem that we have with animals here in our community. Because a private citizen might take in an animal or two that was found on the streets, try to find the owners. Owners never show up. Now they've had the dog for 2 weeks, a month, and then you have the city telling them, well, that's your responsibility now. And we need to find a solution for that. And I think that's part of working together as a community to find ways to help these animals without punishing the people who are trying to save them. And then the last thing is accountability. And that is just one more thing that I think has got to be added to this puzzle that we're all trying really hard to figure out. And if we don't have accountability to those who are in charge, to those who are making the decisions, those who, whether it's animal control or animal services, the rescue groups, there has got to be a way to establish accountability and then the transparency. Those both go hand in hand. So one of the things that I would suggest to our city leadership is that we find a way to establish some type of community volunteer board, probably community members, those who have experience, or especially animal behavior experience, that could try to help to come on those who aren't beholden to rescues, those who aren't beholden to the city, but that who are just community members that would be able to meet and help to establish some transparency and accountability policies and oversight that would help, again, to create more of a community where we are cooperating together instead of working against each other. And then that's all I have to say. Thank you very much.
Is there anybody else that wishes to take time? Yes, ma'am, come on up.
Okay, I'll give this a shot, okay? So I am a citizen of Roswell, but I am also a volunteer for a local rescue group. I've done it for 7 years, if you can imagine that. So I have a good understanding of both, just being a citizen and also being a volunteer for a rescue group. So I just have a few things that weren't really touched on that's coming kind of from both perspectives here. The first one is the hours at our shelter. Since COVID hit, I understand a lot of us, we went down in hours, or we changed our hours due to everybody not being able to come out. We were all inside. But now we're kind of getting back to reality, a little bit of normal, if you want to say that. And our hours at the shelter are not convenient for your, let's say, regular citizen who works an 8-to-5 job, okay? So if you're looking at the hours, they've changed dramatically. I don't even know really kind of what they are, except for like they open at 8, you can go in and see a dog at 10, they close for lunch, and then they close early. So for someone like me who works 8 to 5, barely gets a lunch, so my prime time hour would probably be like 5 to 6. I can't go because they're closed. If you have people wanting to adopt dogs, and they have a lunch hour from 12 to 1, 1 to 2, shelter's closed. So if you really think about it, like the goal should be, how do we help increase adoptions, not how fast we can get them out of our shelter. So if we want to increase our adoptions, we have to think, what are convenient shopping hours, right? Like a local business, right? So if you kind of think about that, that is the hours that people aren't working. So if we're wanting to be committed to increasing adoption and owner reclaims, we have to offer hours that match their lifestyles, which we have to stay open late on weekdays and on weekends when people are off. That's a lot of us, and we don't get that opportunity to go in there anymore because they're closed at those hours. I understand it's hard. You guys don't have enough workers, but just like everybody else, we're trying to make it work. Let me tell you, it's been hard for me and where I work, and we're getting back to it, and we're trying to make sure that everybody has the hours that we need, right? To make sure that everybody is doing what we need to do. So the hours that we have currently at the shelter only benefit the workers, really. And I hate to say that, and it's not in a bad way. Please don't take it that way. But it does not benefit us as citizens. And so if you're wanting to get those adoption reclaims, we have to be able to have a time where we can go and do that. The other thing is the visitation. So we went down to the shelter on a weekend to pull a dog for rescue. And there was a sign that said there was no visitation hours. If I'm a citizen just coming in and I want to look at a dog to adopt, and there's no visiting, like I can't go into the visitation room to do that, how am I gonna know I wanna adopt that dog, right? Like I have to get a feel for the dog, right? You have to spend one-on-one time with that dog. You wanna take your kid there and kind of make sure like your kid gets along with that puppy, things like that. If there's no visitation room available because of whatever reason, that makes it hard to want to adopt a dog. So there's that. The second thing is, the system looks great, but if you're looking at pictures of animals, it's really hard to look at these dogs and think, gosh, that would be a dog that would really go great with my family, right? So just to say a photo is worth 1,000 words, okay, if we take that into consideration, this is not, right? Like if I'm looking for my dog, I'm looking through some of these photos, it's a head, here we go, like just right there. I don't know if that's my dog. I gotta go in and see that dog. Oh, but wait, the only time I can go is when the shelter's closed. So you run into problems like that. It becomes a barrier. So the thing is, I know when we were under different management, me and my mom were able to go and take photos of the dogs. We dressed them up, kind of sounds silly, but we were able to take photos of these dogs and cats when we could, and really show their personality. That's a wonderful thing to do. Just imagine you, if you're on Instagram, Facebook, Tinder, whatever, right? Your photo's not gonna be you in sweatpants on a couch, right? We're like filters and makeup, my hair's done, like, so think about it like that with the animals, okay? Like it's the same thing. We wanna see these animals and their personality because we're looking at this, like, and we're saying, gosh, like that might be my dog. But if you have a headshot with a dog in a hat or just a bow tie or just a dog in general and a nice little, you know, sitting there, which can be done, okay, I'm just saying, that's what you really wanna see. And with the scared and fearful dogs, they're hiding under their beds half the time. You can't even see them. So if that's my dog, because that dog only knows me, my household, and my children, and now it's scared and terrified because it's in a new environment and it doesn't know what to do, I don't even know that's my dog because it's hiding under the bed, which you can kind of see in some of the photos sometimes too. So, you know, photos really do say a lot. And you have a lot of volunteers that would be more than willing to go and help with this. The last thing that I have is, do you know the difference between aggressive and fearful? They're one and the same sometimes. I can say that not only with humans, but also with animals. You really have to have a really good type of training to understand the difference between aggressive dog and scared and fearful. Aggressive is aggressive. I'm mad, I'm upset, and I want to bite someone's hand off, okay? Scared and fearful is a very different kind of look, okay? And you have to really know how to do that and manage like those dogs and really take the time, take that 15 minutes to just maybe get to know the dog, right? And go from there, but you have to know the difference because if you're putting dogs down for aggressive behavior and they're scared and fearful, there's a difference. And then we're putting dogs down because they're fearful. There's a difference. So that's all I have.
Yes, ma'am? Well, then we'll talk next steps. So yes.
I'm also a citizen, but a volunteer for a rescue. And there's been a lot of complaining, but I want to tell you right now, within like the past year, things at Roswell Animal Control have changed and improved. They are not as bad as people are saying. There are occasional instances, maybe, but overall, it smells better. The animals are being cared for a little bit better. They're calling the rescues going, hey, we got a problem. Do you have space? And right now, out of rescues in town, just about every volunteer for the rescues that foster, we're full. And some of that problem is because of the stray animal situation. There was talk about be a responsible pet owner. Some of these animals out there have never, ever, ever had a pet owner. And there are dogs and there are cats roaming town, creating new babies. And they've never had somebody that goes, oh, I need to fix my dog. I need to fix my cat. What can we do as a community to deal with the stray animal population? I know other places do trap, neuter, release. I have family members who went within 7 years of their community instituting trap it, get it fixed, take it back where it came from. They no longer had any stray animals at all. That is a very big thing when they came from a community where you couldn't put your trash out until early in the morning because the stray dogs were going to tear it up all night on trash night when you put trash on the curb where they live. Within 7 years, there were no more animals without a home because all the stray animals had died off and they were not creating more stray animals. But animal control has really improved. They call when they need somebody to try to come and help. And if we have the time and the ability, we go and we do. And also, if you have a manpower issue, is there a way to maybe create a volunteer program where people are brought in, trained, and they can do the 15 minutes to play with the animals, the walk through to make sure the food and water bowls are clean and good. Instead of putting it all off on your short-staffed employees, maybe you can bring in a volunteer program. High school students maybe volunteer for credit. College students maybe volunteer for credit. Maybe you can find students or even people that are home all day with nothing to do. Not me, I teach all day. I come home and I want to go crash. But I could volunteer on a weekend, except that most of my weekends are spent helping get the foster animals that our rescue has pulled transported to another state for them to house and adopt. Because the adoptions here just don't happen very well. Everyone that really wants one has one, or more than they can handle. So my time is spent helping get the ones that we pulled to help out into a new place where they can find a better forever home. But maybe you can call on people that don't have anything to do. Senior citizens, maybe they can load up on the little senior citizen bus and come and volunteer and play with the animals. I don't know, but just an idea, okay? Thank you.
Okay, before we end, again, what are our next steps? Yes? Please do.
Sorry, guys, I'm not in real good health right now, but I wanted to mention something that was very, very important, and that is information sharing between the shelter and the rescues. Always in the past, we were able to get a supposed euthanasia list, kind of a list like, if we fill up tomorrow, these are the dogs that are in danger. So when that happened, we can go out on Facebook and post those dogs and say, these are the ones that are in danger if the shelter fills up. And many times I have gone out there and defended the shelter, said it's not a shelter problem. It's absolutely not. It's a people problem. People aren't being responsible for their dogs. But if we are able to put those dogs out, post those dogs, and say that these dogs are in danger, then a lot of the rescues who have been watching particular dogs but didn't take them for whatever reason, maybe they didn't have room, will see a particular dog and say, oh my gosh, I was watching that dog. I'm not going to let that dog die. So the rescues step up. For the last 3-4 years, we've been able to get those lists. They've always been available. There's no mystery to it. So all of a sudden now, in the last couple of weeks, we have been told that they're not going to share that with us. They won't tell us who's in danger. They won't tell us who's been adopted. They won't tell us who has been reclaimed, who's been euthanized. So we can't update our page and do our jobs effectively. If you wonder why in the last 30 days there have been a lot of dogs euthanized, that is why, because we're not getting the information that we need. And there are very many shelters that post that information themselves. They post it up and say, you know, if we don't get dogs adopted or we fill up, these are the ones that are at most risk. That's very important. But anyway, we've been cut off. And that's all I have to say.
All right, we're gonna end the conversation tonight here. I'm gonna leave you with some pieces in that. In order to help, if everybody will look at that list on the 24 Pet Connect, pick the 5 that have been there the longest, because it's not an issue with aggression or anything. If you can work on those 5 at the tail end that have been there the longest, we might be able to get ahead of that as well too and find a way to work within the listing. About a year ago, we attempted to try to have quarterly meetings with the rescues and fosters and the city because we wanted to keep that communication going. It fell apart. And I guess one of the solutions of coming from this tonight, when we have this many volunteers that are willing to try to help be in that, we will set a meeting and less formal, more informal, with just everybody sitting around the table, and we'll talk before the end of September. There may be city councilors that come to that meeting as well too. We will have staff there, and we will walk through this thing together the way we are supposed to. And I will put it out there. It appears that all of you got the notice to come tonight. And so out of either end or side of this thing, we will get word out to everybody for an informal conversation as to the next steps. And we will find a way to work on this even better than what we have been doing together. I like the idea of the hours, and it needs to work for those that need to get those critters out of there as well too. Mr. Mayor wanted to speak and just share a little bit, so I'm going to let Mayor Jennings end the meeting.
First of all, I want to thank you all for coming. And it's been alluded to that there's not any transparency, and I can tell you I am not opposed to any transparency. I think we should have it. I believe that we should know. I would tell you that if there's one lady that is transparent, I think, is Juliana Halverson. She's our chairman. She's our council lady over this area. And I'm going to tell you, if you don't know her, I don't know where you've been. You've been under a rock, because she works over at Pioneer Bank, but she's done more on Main Street, does a lot on Main Street, Roswell, and pushing Roswell forward. So I think we're able. I think Juliana can do a fine job. She certainly is accessible to the people in the community, and she certainly won't hide from anyone. But I would just tell you that I anticipate us being open together and working together to solve the problem. And that's the only way it's going to work. And this is an issue. It's not brought on necessarily by us. It's brought on by people who are just plain not responsible. And you have a lot of people that breed animals and everything else, and just let them go amok, and they take them out in the country and leave them. That happens all the time. And when you get animals, when the rescue people, when they come in, and you have officers that pick them up from Lake Arthur and bring them all the way down here and get here, and when they they put them in a cage, and then because it's in the middle of the night and the rescue workers come in, or the workers come in and find them, there's a lot of issues there because they haven't been treated. And when we talk about animals, we have some problems in our shelter that are going to have to be addressed. And there's not enough air movement in that facility to take care of it. They can get with all that water, can get very humid, and And just, if you don't circulate that air with fresh air, you can't use refrigerated air or anything, because else you'll just amplify the kennel cough. So you have to use fresh air. We have some things we're going to have to change, and our methods of holding and everything else we're going to have to look at that. But together, I think we can all come forward and do it. But you know, when you think about that, and when Ed and I went into that facility, Mike's been there before, but I think when Ed and I went into that facility, one of the first places we went, when we walked in the door, there were all these puppies. And you know, how can anybody, when the puppy jumps on the fence and sticks his nose through the chain link and wants you just to lick you, how can you not let him do it? And yet, you know, it's the frustration we have in the whole program is I wanted to touch every puppy in there, and I wanted to lick him, I wanted to pet him. But you know, as soon as I did that, I shared kennel cough, or the ability to get kennel cough, with every dog in that place. So when you look at this problem we have here tonight, it's not simple. Because you can't just show love to every puppy there, because you could be killing other dogs or amplifying the problems that we have to get them adopted. And so this is just something, it kind of, to me, the not being able to pet that dog, those dogs was extremely frustrating to me, because I've only had, I think, one dog I ever paid for in my life. Every other dog I've had has been one somebody dropped off. And I can even tell you the difference between picking up a chocolate lab or a black lab. You know, one's a puppy and the chocolate lab a little older, and how long the chocolate lab stayed there before I picked it up. But the black lab puppy was gone in a heartbeat. People want puppies, they don't want older dogs. All those frustrations we have to work our way through, but we can do it together. But I'm going to need your help too, because when we start talking about, looking about ways to fund some of this stuff, we're going to have to address it. And we're also going to have to address breeders. You know, I mean, who in Roswell doesn't know about the cat people? They go around and will feed cats all over town. They live in little houses, and you go by and they put out tons of cat food, and there are cats everywhere. I mean, right by our office, they picked up like 30 cats and 3 skunks. And downtown. But you know, people are doing that. And then you throw that in with a little ringworm, and we got a problem. But, you know, I want to just tell you, I think, Juliana, I think your council's here to work with you, but we're all here to work together. So I hope we can do that. I think we can, but we don't need to call names. We don't need to, you know, nobody's out here trying to kill the dogs on purpose, but we do have to address it, because when we walk through that thing, I'll bet there were probably 20, 30 dogs had been there more than 21 days, Ed. Wouldn't you agree with that? I mean, been more than 21 days. So the facility was full. You know, we need help, but together we can sure come close to solving it. Thank you all very, very much for coming. Thank my council members, all of you. Thank you. Appreciate it, and thank you all for coming. Yes.
Okay, guys, I'm Nicole Rogers. I am the Roswell Animal Control Supervisor. One thing that I haven't heard a lot of is thank you. Thank you to my guys back there. This is a thankless job. It's an ugly job, and they come to work every day. They come to work every day. Schultz, I see back, thank you. Nobody wants to do this job, and I will gladly invite anybody to come follow one of us for a full day just to see what we have to see, what we go through, so that you all don't. So thank you from the bottom of my heart. I have your guys' back. We appreciate all of you guys, Sammy, Dan, Fora, friends, Peace of Mind, June's Cat Rescue. Thank you guys. We couldn't do it without you guys. We literally can't, which is why we're doing everything we can to keep it transparent. I did want to say, ma'am, we are open through lunch. It is very hard without staffing, but we are open through lunch. and we are open on Saturdays. So thank you guys.
Thank you, everybody, for taking your time to come out. Give us a holler. Let's keep working on this. Have a good evening.